here's another movie that I was anticipating this year ever since I knew its existence. And that one is none other than Civil War. And no, I'm not talking about Captain America Civil War. That was years ago. And this is, of course, this is not a Marvel movie either. It's not even Civil War 2 from the Marvel property. It is, yet again, another movie that is directed by someone who I kind of also have a bit of a love-hate relationship, almost similar to Christopher Nolan. And that is none other than Alex Garland. Again, I do want to say that I do have the love-hate relationship is mostly because I respect him. I can see that he is a talented director, can be a talented writer, but man, that I don't know what to say. I probably might think that this guy, he's probably even more pretentious than Christopher Nolan himself. Because most of his well-known movies, they try to be kind of like this intellectual, philosophical, that it kind of makes he wants to show that he is kind of like smarter than anyone else. That in a way, it's kind of like annoyingly pretentious. I mean, it's not a bad thing, I'll say. It's just kind of like it's something that it can get a little bit annoying, but yeah, every artist needs a little bit of pretentiousness here and there. But don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that I dislike him. I mean, I like Ex Machina. Ex Machina was actually kind of like a clever movie that puts him on the map. Although let's face it, it wasn't exactly great because it kind of tended to drag on sometimes. A lot of people apparently like Annihilation, but unfortunately I wasn't very keen for it. I found that movie even forgettable. And the last movie that he made, which is, man, and the more I think about it, Man was actually not that good. Ambitious, but the idea behind it was cringe. Man was a kind of like it's really a cringy movie, and so in a way, looking back, I kind of begin to really dislike that movie for the things that it was aiming for, and it kind of didn't go nowhere. And so, I know, like you can see, Alex Garland, I still think that he's good, but he can be a little bit overrated. But still, Civil War kind of caught my attention, in which it kind of introduced, the premise about what will happen if the United States will go through modern times civil war. Just like the old times, we had the history of the Civil War, where the nation is divided because of different ideals, and they go to war, they get bloody. And what will happen if the same thing happened in modern times? That's what the kind of like the idea that the trailer kind of gives. In a way, I was kind of expecting a little bit something kind of like action-packed. But considering that it was Alex Garland, maybe you could come up with something a little bit more kind of like intellectual, more kind of like the cautionary tale that he kind of tried to make the point in Ex Machina. Because I'm gonna make a lot of comparisons to Ex Machina, considering that that movie was kind of like a cautionary tale about artificial intelligence, that they get so real in their emotions that they're able to even fool people, and it can give out some deadly consequences. After that one, to kind of go over in a kind of like in a horror movie vibe here and there. This one, they kind of more go into, you could say it maybe a little bit of horror, but I found it more kind of like a thriller. Uh, it was more thriller than horror. Maybe I got a little bit desensitized in some things, which is kind of weird because here's something curious that happened after the movie ended. When the movie ended, I decided to go home. I grabbed something to eat, to take back home. I got on the train, and then a guy on the which was a passenger. He gave me the scares because he had kind of like this red lips, and he just kind of began to talk gibberish. I didn't know what to do, so my mind didn't process that. I just got away from him, almost like you usually do when you don't want any trouble or something like that. But then I realized that some people they started leaving the train, and I turned my back, and I saw some big guy kicking the face of the same guy that I just saw. So I didn't know what to do, just got out, and then I'm not gonna go much into detail, but let's say that it almost turned into a fight, and to the point that the police came and arrested the guy. So I wasn't even panicking, but I did have what I did had to do, but still it kind of made me ponder a lot of things about my own weakness. Which is kind of weird considering that about the movie that I just saw, Civil War. But still, while pondering, I will say that I did like it. I did like the movie, although I'm not gonna go into lengths to overpraise it. I've been seeing the whole internet saying that this movie is scary, this movie is chilling, this movie is amazing, or something like that. Okay, yeah, you got your point, but let's not overhype it, because there are a few issues that I do have with the movie. It's not exactly kind of like an issue that is gonna harm the movie in itself, but honestly, I don't think. But I will say that at least, this movie I like it much better than Men. This is his. This is his. At least this is kind of like his apology letter to Men. And even now to this day, I think that I'm still kind of debating a little bit if this movie is kind of a little bit better than Ex Machina, because a little bit the tone is a bit similar, but this one is a little bit more open here and there. And although I will say this, that more than the movie is about a civil war, it's actually a little bit more about journalism, because the whole movie is kind of treats itself in kind of showcasing the risk and the feelings that people must go through when they're doing war journalism on that time. Even though that part of the journalism storytelling, it is interesting, but there's a little bit of a kind of like a nifty flaw that I think the movie kind of overlooked a little bit, but I will get to that. So anyway, the movie, the movie story is that it's like I said, it is technically in the future, not super futuristic one, mostly similar to today's modern times, in which it doesn't specify what happened, but basically there's this civil war. There are front lines in the United States. They are fighting each other. There are people sometimes resources are a little bit scarce in some areas. Like for example, there's not much water. Electricity is a little goes up and down. But the weird thing is that people still have the kind of like the same commodities here and there. It's not like it's almost and I'll get to that. But the thing is that there's this war. There is this president. The president is played by Nick Offerman. He's going through a third re-election, even though the United States clearly have the rule that they can only be re-elected twice. And well, apparently everyone got kind of like the military forces. They're fighting each other, and well, honestly, they don't give exactly any reason why the Civil War started. It's just that. But basically, then we center on a group of journalists in which we have our protagonist played by Kirsten Dunst. She's basically kind of like this hard-on professional journalist that she goes with her little group, which is how can I say? One of them is played by Wagner Moura, and the other one, where is it at? Oh, and the other one played by Stephen McKinley Henderson. And then we got an upstart tag along who played by Kaylee Spaney, who is this young journalist who look up to Kirsten Dunst, and she wants to be a war photographer, and well, they decided to go from, I think it was from New York, and they're going on a road trip to Washington D.C. because they want to have a scoop and an interview with the president. And of course, when they mean by a road trip, that means they have to go through a lot of the things that the Civil War leave. Like for example, that they have to go through people that they're gathered and doing, they're gathered, to have their peace of mind. They have to go through places that it has some that they're killing people and so on and so on. And yeah, basically it's a little bit kind of like a road trip, and we see Kaylee Spaney being kind of like the audience surrogate, in which she's trying to see the horrors that the Civil War gave us, and she has to learn to harden herself in order to not give out kind of like some kind of side, and just do your job. Just take a picture and just continuing on, no matter the horror of the things that there are. In a way, I'm gonna say that this is what the characters, I kind of like that they don't tend to be preachy or annoying or something like that. Although there is one moment that it comes up a little bit too silly, but let's get this over with. Let's say, for example, we have our main protagonist, Kirsten Dunst. She during the whole movie, you see that she is kind of like this professional, and she tries to keep the emotion for herself. She doesn't go exactly kind of like this big arc, but that she knows what to do, especially when she kind of comes out with the unexpected responsibility that her fan is tagging along unwantedly, and then she just begins to teach her a little bit the ropes, and they kind of form kind of like this odd friendship. Well, I wouldn't say odd. I will say that it kind of like admirer and student tutelage. This brings me, of course, with Kaylee Spaney, in which this is a character that she's kind of like the surrogate, the audience surrogate, in which she wants to be a hard-on journalist. She's naive, she's green, but of course she wants to get the moment in order to get her experience. And of course, it is a good way to have the experience hard on. Also, there are a few times, luckily not very much, that she kind of is a little bit the Scrappy Doo of the movie. And luckily not annoying. I mean, because sometimes this is a character that could easily be hated, but luckily she isn't, and they make kind of like a good job in in making her go through the ropes of the of war journalism. Although my little bit critique that I have with that character is that, in a way, I kind of wish that this character is a little bit more vulnerable. I don't know. Is that they make her a little bit too headstrong, and honestly, I kind of I'm pretty much kind of like a sucker if I can see that this is a character that is a little bit more vulnerable, and that could be a little bit more, how can I say, relatable. We also have Wagner Moura. So he's kind of like the guy, who kind of makes jokes. He's kind of like the, I don't know if I want to call him kind of like a comic relief, because he isn't. He's kind of like the macho man of the group, and he has to make the proceedings. I don't know. It's hard to describe this character, but he's kind of like a character. Stephen McKinley Henderson. He plays the old man who, he's kind of like, this guy was probably kind of like one of my favorite characters, because actually kind of acts like a father figure to almost all the characters. That he's kind of like likable. This is a nice guy that you like to hang around. So I gotta say that this is he kind of brings some kind of like warmth, humanity to, let's say, I would say kind of like this Cold War tension vibe that the kind of like the movie has. And well, now I'm gonna go a little bit with the. There are some other characters here and there, but they're kind of like more incidental. Although, although it like a kind of like a road trip movie, they encounter kind of like a different style of characters, and they have to go through with it, and they go through certain situations, and well, that's technically what it is. Cinematography. One thing that I do gotta praise to Judy Garland, not Alex Garland, is that he's very good with the camera. There are good shots, there are good cinematography. Although there are some moments in which you can see that he has a certain kind of love to slow-mo, but luckily he doesn't overuse it like Zack Snyder. And there are some great shots, and then there's also kind of like moments in which they are a little bit, the journalists are taking shots of what is going on with the camera, and when they take and since we are in the perspective of Kaylee Faney, whenever she takes kind of like a shot with the camera, she takes a picture, and then kind of we see a little bit of what she take and the shots that she does. So in a way, for some reason in my head, I have kind of like this cynical moment in which I was picturing Professor Oak from Pokemon Snap saying, "That was wonderful. Yeah, we're close." I don't know. I don't know. That was something unintentionally funny. That maybe this kind of made the movie a little bit more lighthearted to me. In which I kind of want to rename the movie Pokemon Snap Wartime. Because that was what it kind of felt like. It was kind of like Pokemon Snap, but in dark and dreary. No offense, that's what came to my head. But either way, it does show. I gotta admire that there is kind of that it does build well a little bit the tensions of what the war is doing. Although I like that it doesn't go into the preaching and saying that no, this is wrong or something like that. This is what I like. It doesn't it since it basically we don't exactly know why this war came out, but it's pretty much obvious that it is a little bit in the kind of like the political side. They give hints and bits about it, but let's say that this is also makes out some of the parts kind of like a little bit weak, and I'll get to that because I do want to talk a bit about the cinematography that. There are some parts that you see some of the effort on the setting here and there. There is kind of like a very gritty segment that involve corpses, and well, let's say that the sight is not exactly pretty when people get killed here and there, and well. But there is also a little bit of a nitpick that I also have to say about the cinematography choices, and that is that because the movie and also in Alice Garland style is it also have kind of like the same problem that his other movies have, and that is that the movie is a little bit also of a slow burn. The pacing can get a little bit slow to the point that this movie I felt like it felt like 3 hours long. I thought about that, but no. What was it? This movie was an hour 49, and I thought that it felt a little bit longer. But it wasn't. It's not kind of like a bad thing, but some things kind of feel like it dragged on a little bit. Not too much, but that's how I felt. Maybe it's kind of like it's hard to describe. But there's also a little bit of a nitpick that sometimes because they wanted to make some kind of mood, they kind of put this kind of like this soundtrack that is, let's say that it kind of gets a little bit countryside. It's almost like they wanted to make kind of like a wartime movie, and they go kind of in the style a little bit of Apocalypse Now or a little bit The Last of Us. And I'm not gonna complain too much about the music choices because I am kind of like poured into it, but I'm not exactly kind of like a fan when you want to put some music in order to put the mood here and there. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Although let's say that the music choices that they do a far better job than the Super Mario Brothers movie. That's technically it that I will say. And now let's go with a little bit about the thematic of the movie, in which I gotta say that as much as I like the movie, there are some things that it leaves to be desired. I think that this movie, what it lacks, is a little bit more bite. It has the bite, but it's not too deep. We concentrate a little bit too much on the photojournalism aspect. That I mean, it's an interesting approach. I like that. I like that aspect. That makes the movie a little bit interesting, because it kind of wanted to reflect, journalists that go to that they go to the front lines in which they don't go to fight. They just go and take pictures, and that's it. It's kind of like their job, and how much they have to, they have to deal, and they have to suppress some certain emotions and opinions in order to do that, to do their job. And well, again, the movie doesn't take side because again, we don't know why they're fighting, and it's kind of like vague. I don't know what happened. So honestly, this is kind of like the double-edged sword of the journalism take on. It doesn't feel like it's a movie about civil war, but more about journalism. So it doesn't exactly go for what it is. And the biggest reason why I said so is because the movie kind of makes me wish to see more about the war side. We get to see here and there, but I wanted to, uh, I'm gonna sound a little bit cynical, but I wanted to see kind of like more carnage, more dead people here and there. I mean, there is, but it should be a little bit more focused on what is going on. I want to see kind of like more bodies hanging. They got there, but it doesn't show much. I want to see more how the world kind of like changed and how and honestly, I felt like I know that it might sound kind of like exaggerated. Uh, I wanted to sound some exaggerated because there comes kind of like a moment in which kind of like the tension kind of comes to a stop, especially when they go to places that are not exactly the front lines, where it's a little bit more Pacific. Like for example, they reach kind of like a town where they're in which almost it feels like it's fine. It feels fine except for a few guys, looking at a top, and it was like they even kind of say that, wow, this is kind of like a Twilight Zone, but uh, uh, but honestly, maybe that it could have been a little bit more kind of like cruel if we get the kind of like the scene in which they get air raid. So uh, uh, this one needed kind of like more war elements instead of showcasing some people doing fine here and there. Although I'm not exactly kind of like knowledgeable about that war things. And even thought, now that I think about it, it kind of makes the whole military aspect a little bit more kind of like eye-raising eyebrows, because in a civil war, considering that if I pay attention, maybe one of the allied states that were between Texas and California. It doesn't. It kind of makes you question how did they manage to get kind of like a military weaponry to get armed, and also considering the extent of the United States weaponry. I think that there should have been more destruction than what we already seen, unless this is kind of like an early stage of war times. And also a little bit of kind of like a nitpick to journalism. I think they kind of overlook that to make journalism feel a little bit more safer, they kind of forgot drones. There are no drones for journalism or even war, and we're in a culture that these people are smart enough to use kind of one of these. But instead they go, old-fashioned. You just take the camera and take the pictures, and there it is. So as you can tell, there are some. This is kind of like the reason why I think that a little bit the message of the satire didn't hit me as much as it is. But probably the closest thing that it got close to that is when it's the moment where the group gets captured by these extremists that they shoot anyone, and civilians, whatever it is, and they have kind of like this big giant pile of corpses, and they just shoot anyone that is, well, not American, because they just kind of say what it is an American and all this stuff. You saw that in the trailer. I'm not gonna exactly reveal much about what happened, but this is kind of like the closest thing that I wish that the movie could have been a little bit that dark and gritty. This should have been a lot around the movie. It had to see more carnage, more bodies, and all this stuff. But we have kind of like this road trip in which it does what it wanted to do, but not exactly what I was expecting to, or what I kind of feel like it wanted to do for a message about, well, Civil War. If this guy wanted to kind of portray kind of like this message about the horrors about an America divided. Honestly, like I said, I kind of like a little bit more. I wanted to have a little bit kind of like more like a bite that it feels like the teeth sink in. And honestly, it's almost like people are calling this movie controversial, but you know what? I don't see it. It doesn't feel like it has a side. If people feel like it is anti-leftist, anti-Trumpist, I don't see it. I technically don't see it, which I found this movie kind of like it took a little bit too safe, and so I thought that this is what, at least in my perspective, kind of diminishes a little bit about it. This is why the more I think about it, a few years ago there came this controversial movie that was, I think it was a little bit too leftist or rightist. I don't exactly know how to term it because I'm pretty bad at politics. It came this movie called The Hunt. That movie was a total satire, and that one what really felt like what Civil War should have been. And I'm one of the few people that actually liked The Hunt. Not a lot of people like that one. Maybe because they didn't get the joke or something like that, but that movie had a big bite, and it's kind of like unapologetic, and I like that movie better. I like The Hunt better than Civil War. Although, yeah, I give it kind of like credit to that. Or if we go into more extreme but stupider way, The Purge. The Purge franchise could have is actually, it had the correct mood of how a Civil War should have been. That's what I expected more about Civil War. And now that I think about it, isn't during a Civil War people kind of get into chaos, and we should have seen kind of like even regular people looting, robbing, doing stuff. I mean, they have the elements, but they don't show kind of like quite enough. And of course, that all leads to the climax, in which the best way I can describe it is what will happen if January 6th was militarized. And it got the thrills. I give it that. It was intense. That was kind of like intense. And even though the ending, I'm beginning to hear that it is quite, well, how can I say, not many people are very fond of it. I won't reveal what it is, but in a way, I think that the biggest letdown about the ending is that it's a little bit predictable. It's kind of a bit predictable and doesn't lead to much kind of like a big quite of a solution. But I will say this. It's a better ending than the one from Man. Alright. I think I already told my piece about Civil War without spoiling too much. And despite that I gave out some of my kind of like observational nitpicks, I kind of, how can I say, highly recommend this movie, which is, it is an interesting movie. It is not something that you're gonna see kind of like every day, in which it kind of make this kind of talk. Like I said, it is a thrilling movie that showcases some of the chops that you go through journalism through the eyes of people on during a wartime era. The only thing that kind of misses out is to build up kind of like a more biting satire about a divided United States. This could have been kind of like a more interesting thing, but things get a little bit too vague that it leaves a little bit too much to be desired. And this sometimes things when they are a little bit too vague it kind of it begins to lose some of the stuff that you wanted to tell. And so in this case, what you wanted, I don't understand what Alex Garland wanted to say about this movie. Does it wanted to showcase about the chops of photojournalism, or it wanted to make a kind of a cautionary tale about a divided America? Even that part, it felt more like kind of like a just it kind of it's just more used as a setting than kind of like the main gist. It was more about journalism than anything other than that. So well, that's all I have to say. Civil War and nothing much else to say. Good movie, has its thoughts. It's just like Alex Garland movie. And so well, that it is to say. That makes me question. After the movie, I wonder what happened to the guy on Chattanooga.
The first danged Yankee that steps out of that dugout gets his head blasted off.